Good morning. Today we will talk about human translation and machine translation. First, can machine translation replace human translation or can it make it useless? Nowadays, technologies are evolving too fast and this includes machine translation. But how fast is it going? Let's imagine machine translation replaces human translation. There are multiple devices that translate easier and faster. Could we still use human translation? In one hand, machine translation uses algorithms, symbols, and databases combined by a software in order to translate. On the other hand, human translation is based on reasoning in order to apply grammar and sense to a translation. However, human translation does not only translate words, sentences, or paragraphs like machine translation. Human translation also expresses context, intentions, ideas, emotions, or perceptions. Nevertheless, can machine translation be more efficient than human translation? As machine translation improves with the technological advances, human translation may become unviable. In this presentation, we will explain the process, the advantages and the disadvantages of machine translation and human translation, and finally, a comparison between both types. We will start explaining the process of machine translation. It's a system that uses complex algorithms to translate from a language to another based on probabilities. Some examples of machine translation that we might know are Google Translate or Microsoft Bing Translator that had gained popularity in these past years. For example, Google Translate daily all the output that professionals all over the world translate in a year. In other words, Google translates in one day what all humans translators do in a year. Moving on to the advantages of machine translation are that it increases the volume and speed of translation. This means that it is faster than human translation. Another benefit is related to the cost of machine translation. Several machine translators are free, while human translators usually charge different rates per page or per word. According to professional translators, the use of machine translation can lead to productivity gains and it can be efficient for certain kinds of text. Some disadvantages of machine translation are that it needs a lot of editing to be adequate to publish. It also says that professional translators agree that machine translation can be ineffective for certain types of writing because it affects the quality of this text. Component analyzed translated text between machine translation and human translation and found out that the machine translated text had more errors than human translated text. In addition, some common mistakes of machine translation are the omission, the addition, or the mistranslation of concepts. To sum up, considering the advantages and the disadvantages of machine translation, it seems that this type of translation has a lot to improve to eventually surpass human translation. Now, my partner will explain human translation.
Now, I, Ian Piromelet, I am going to talk about the human translation. It's a process that only humans can understand where we use grammatical points to make precise translations. The final work of this process, that is translation itself as a product, is produced by three agents. The translator, in charge to transfer information from one language to another, capturing the essence from the original text. Then we have the professional editor, who revises and refines the translator's work and checks for errors in the grammar. If everything is okay, then the product is sent to the manager, who reviews the final product. if it's in the required format and ready to deliver to the client. In this type of translation, we have some important translators along the time. For example, we have Saint Jerome. Saint Jerome, who translated the majority of the Bible from Greek and Hebrew to Latin, and his translations are considered as the official Catholic translation of the Bible. But also, we have Jorge Luis Borges. Jorge Luis Borges, when he was only 9, he translated a bedtime story called The Happy Prince by Oscar Wilde into Spanish. Later, he translated Allan Poe, Franz Kafka, André Gide, Virginia Woolf, and many others into Spanish. Very impressive for a man who was also an author. Another example of human translation are the agencies, translation agencies. They gather various translators from different languages. Here in the slide we have Lionbridge, Mars Translations, Textmasters, and many others. Of course, as machine translation has its pros and cons, also human translation has its own. And starting with advantages, we have that human translation is a complex and extended process to finally understand the process. So the final work is more precise and expresses the essence of the author. The next advantage is that as humans, we can understand the context, puns, metaphors, meaning, and translate them something into that a machine can't do easily. And the last advantage of human translation is that sometimes we have terms in one language that have no translation in another one. So if this happens, we can find terms which can fit into the final work. On the other hand, we have disadvantages. For example, the first disadvantages of human translation is it requires more time. It's because this process is complex and extended, so it demands more time. Also, human translation can be a bit expensive, and even if it's not costly, you are still paying compared to machine translation that you generate do the work for free on the web or on the internet. And another disadvantage of human translation is that you frequently will have to search for translators on agencies and search for translators available. This mainly requires more time also. So, to sum up, machine translation is a system that employs algorithms and probabilities to translate from one language to another. Machine translation has advantages like the gain in productivity, the rise in quantity, and speed of translation. Besides that, machine translation systems like Google Translate are usually free. However, it has disadvantages like being ineffective to translate certain texts, making more errors than human translations. Therefore, comparing the benefits and drawbacks of both types, it seems that machine translation still has a lot to enhance to replace human translation. While human translation is a more complex process that cannot be calculated or processed mathematically, however, there still are difficulties. For example, it takes too much time to have a translation work finished, and translator services could be high-priced. But for a correct grammar, review, and form, it could be a reasonable price. Since machine translation is still an emerging process of development and refinement, human translation is far from being replaced by it. Consequently, machine translation can be a tool for professional translators to enhance their work. We suggest professional translators can improve their translations with help of machine translation. Therefore, it could be the case that human translation and machine translation can develop a complementary relationship and not as competitive relationship.